Hi everyone, it's Russ here again, and today's topic was suggested by my good friend Mike. Hiking alone or not alone? That's the question that we're going to be answering today. About a year and a half ago, I put a survey out actually on Facebook, just amongst my private friends, and I asked if you're going on an extended hike, do you prefer going alone or with someone else? And I got 10 direct responses. Now, not many of my friends are actually hikers, so that's actually pretty good. 6 people very specifically said they would go with someone, and 4 of them mentioned safety explicitly. One mentioned that boredom would be their biggest problem with going alone, and one mentioned bringing a dog without actually saying go with someone, at least a dog, without actually saying that safety was the concern. 3 people commented just a little bit of banter back and forth. They weren't hikers. And one hiked alone, but did day hikes only. So that's really 7 people when it was 6-1 for hiking with somebody else. So that's just a baseline to look at. So the biggest concern is safety, and I certainly don't make light of that. But I think you mitigate safety concerns, at least on the Appalachian Trail and probably the Pacific Crest Trail and things like the Long Trail where there's a lot of people around. But you can mitigate the safety concern with knowledge, and that's why I have the Gut Hook program running on my phone. That does several things for me. One, there's a GPS in it so that if I do wander off trail, I realize that I can always get back to the trail. And if I need to know where the nearest hospital is, for example, I can find that out. Second is, of course, communications. My Garmin tracker I use. I have a full video actually on these 2 things, and I'll put a link in the description about that. The third thing is, while you're out there, follow safe habits. Use a bear box if it's available. When you come across a very tough stretch of trail, take the time to take the trekking pole loops off so that you have free use of your hands if you have a climb down or something like that. There was a woman, this Geraldine Largay. She was known as Inchworm, and back in 2013, she lost the trail, and unfortunately, after surviving for 26 days in the woods, she finally passed away. And the saddest part about this story to me, with the personal safety thing, is that if this had occurred just 3 or 4 years later, she very likely would have had these devices like I show here. She would have had a Gut Hook on her phone with a GPS, or she would have had a tracker of some kind that would have given an SOS. Unfortunately, she was relying just on her cell phone, and there was no cell service out there. And sadly, she was found. Her remains were found a couple years later. A very sad story. Mike and I were actually up in the area while they were looking for her. I looked at the time tags on my photographs from that trip, and she had already passed away before we were up there, but they were still searching for her. And it's just, one of those sad stories of timing being everything. It is dangerous out there, and we have to acknowledge that. But with the right safety equipment, the best available at the time, unfortunately for her, it wasn't enough. And I think there's been a very large leap in safety since these devices came in common use. But safety, if you're alone, is an issue. But one of the advantages of being hiking alone is solitude and freedom. First, your schedule is your own. You're not beholden to anybody. If you want to take a half a day hike, or if you want to take a 0 day, or if you want to go on a side trail, you don't need to get agreement with somebody else. It's your decision. You're out there, time to enjoy yourself. The second advantage is the time for quiet contemplation. I do a lot of thinking when I'm out there hiking alone. You think of the things you're thankful for. I spend a lot of time thinking about Darlene. I'm very thankful for her, obviously. I quite often actually am thinking while I'm out there, wow, Craig would like this, or Mike would like this. I wish he was here with me. So, there's a little bit of that. but it's a good time to have to yourself. Now, the counterpoint to that is loneliness and limitations. Like I said, I'm often thinking of others as I go through a particular stretch of trail. I quite often think about somebody else I've hiked with, usually Mike or Laura or Craig, in how much they might like this stretch of trail. And while you're not totally alone in the sense that there are usually hikers coming the other way, or occasionally a hiker going in your direction, just the logistics of you're moving on the trail, you actually don't see as many people going in your direction as you do the opposite direction. But the ones you see in the opposite direction, you just see for a moment, and then they're gone. But you can hike along with somebody going your direction for a while. No commitments. You can still make your choices. But there are limitations also. For example, I'm actually less adventurous than, for example, Mike is. When Mike and I were hiking New York and New Jersey, he always seemed to be the one to take the lead and say, hey, let's go do this. And that was really great because, like I said, I'm a little timid. I'm a little you go, plus going certain places, alone, just like I'd feel like I was out of place. I'd go to a restaurant and eat alone or something like that. You got somebody with you. It looks like, you're not just a loser. So those are the advantages and disadvantages of hiking alone. Hiking with somebody else, well, aside from the safety issues, which we already talked about, there's the camaraderie of shared experiences. Whether it is trying to ford a river and helping each other get across a log or down a steep climb or something, that kind of group sort of thing where you're all enjoying being out there together. Whether it's hey, let's get a picture of us at the top of this hill. In this case, Logan and Craig and I climbed up to, I think that was Twin Peak, and just being out with family, like our climb up Mount Monadnock. In this picture, we have Julie and Amber, and Craig's kind of out of the picture, but I've got plenty of pictures of Craig here. So there is the camaraderie of hiking with somebody else. Decision making. There are group decisions. In this picture here, we see Craig at the top of Mount Musalaki. And there was a decision where he kind of actually drove the decision, and that was that, Dad, on this particular hike, you're not making it. And I've talked before about it was because of a particular medication I was on was tiring me out. But the reason we went up Mount Musalaki is actually we slack packed up Mount Musalaki. We got to the first half of our trip. We got to the Hiker's Welcome Hostel, and we were going to quit early, and the caretaker there said, hey, why don't you just slack pack over Mount Musalaki? It'd be a nice day, a 10-mile hike for you. And that was actually a great thing. But again, it was a decision where Craig actually had to help make the decision for the sake of the weakest person in the herd, so to speak. We had to cut it short. And then in this other case, this is us, I guess Laura must have taken this picture, but this is us having breakfast. The time that I had a herniated disc in my back. So again, the group made a decision that it was in my best interest that we hike out of there. So there is the advantage of decision making. You're not caught alone if something does go bad. So just one of the things to consider. There's also the sharing of equipment or expenses. Now, Mike and I don't share shelter. He usually uses a hammock, and I usually use a tent, though we did go on one trip, the New York, New Jersey trip, where I actually had I had a tent on that one, a Maine one. We went up in Maine where I had the hammock, and he had a hammock. But when I'm out with Craig, we can share the tent, and that just means it's that much less weight that, per person we have to carry. Expenses you can share. Here's I don't want to insult them, I call it a flea bag hotel. It was a less than 5-star hotel. It wasn't a 1-star hotel. It wasn't dirty or anything like that. It was an older roadside motel. And Brian and I, somebody who I had hiked with, shared the expense of that hotel. I was actually going to go visit my high school track coach, and his trip was over, so we shared the expense of that plus the world's largest pizza We actually did manage, the two of us did manage to consume most of that. I think there were a couple pieces left over for breakfast, which I forget whether we actually bothered with in the morning. But when you're with others, there is the sharing of expenses, there is the sharing of decision making, and there is the sharing of equipment at times. The problem is if you're sharing equipment like a water filter or something like that, you really can't get too separated because that's something you may need out on the trail. Tent not so bad as long as you know you're both going to get to the campsite. Whoever gets there with the tent can set it up and everything's fine from there. So to answer the question about alone or not alone, well, the answer is really both.